People don't work for the government works for the people.
Government doesn't care about you.
Anything that is not mission focused, I don't care. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care about your social justice issues. I don't care.
We are returning to first principles.
Hopefully. A lot of the nonsense that we've seen through society is because we are so fortunate. Other countries are way more racist than America. Way more racist.
Oh my God, yeah. We used to go to like soccer games all over Europe.
How'd that go?
You don't want to listen to those chants.
The Daniel Petty situation. I will regret this for the rest of my life if I don't say anything. And I hit publish. And all of a sudden my wife called me.
You have free will. Go do what you may with it.
I did not hear a single person I knew who had been on the right who said I'm switching to the left.
Zuckerberg saying that, hey, we were neutered as a company, not just corporations, like American culture in general.
Who cares? Men, women, blah, blah, whatever. Like, just pick the best people.
They have realized that the whole thing is not worth it.
What's not worth it?
This whole thing, going to work, hustling for your boss, promotion, is not getting me anywhere closer.
I need to have a life. There's trade-offs in life. Success is being excited to go to work and being excited to go home.
I want to push back.
No, go ahead, tell me.
You posted a video about the LA fire. The thesis of it is basically that government doesn't care about you and how they failed one entire state. I want to touch on that and the bigger theme of how it seems like there's a malaise regarding how Americans feel about their government. Planes are not working, cities are not clean, there's crime. Let's start with LA and what do you think went wrong there, and then we'll zoom out to the macro.
Well, the government is supposed to be there to serve the people, right? The people don't work for the government works for the people.
Yeah.
And if you look at what the government started to do was the government stopped caring about the majority and it started caring about the loud minority. And so really the governments around the country, both at the local, state, and even at the federal level, got held hostage by the extremists within their constituents. And so if you look at kind of an approach, you can say, hey, look, I'm never going to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
But should I try to make the 95% happy, or should I try to appeal and make the 5% happy and hold the 95% to the standards or the, happiness level of the 5%? Obviously, you should make the majority of people and serve their needs. And so if you go and you look at this, you can see it in the language. The language tells on them. And frankly, I think that most of it is on the left, but there are examples on the right as well, where you will see people describe. It used to be that when somebody was introduced, they would use words like where they went to school, or their past accomplishments, right? Maybe even the media that covered them, right? Or if they had a best-selling book. Now it's like what their pronouns are, what their gender or what their sexuality, right? Maybe it's a religion thing or a race thing. Like it's all the things that when you were a kid, or at least when I was growing up, you were told, like, we don't judge people based on these things. It now becomes like a badge of pride. And so that's like one huge part of it, but it's not the full story. You can't say, hey, in LA, a wildfire, and let's say that the Palisades fire, we don't know yet, but let's say that that is a true natural disaster, right? It was started naturally, it spread naturally, et cetera. That's not the politician's fault.
No.
That's not the local government's fault. That has nothing to do with DEI or ESG or any of that stuff, right? Sure, there are people who will say, oh, they didn't, get the brush out, they didn't, all that kind of stuff. But very quickly, things like, why is the reservoir not filled? Right? Why? Okay, now you're like
start asking questions.
Well, now you are just accentuating and kind of like increasing your liability to this event. It's not because you started it. It's because how you were prepared to respond to it. And I think the best example is Rick Caruso, who pretty much was vilified in LA because he is a white successful man. Which again, like, who cares what your skin color is, what your gender, like, who's going to do the best job, right? Palisades Village is still standing with, minimal damage and everything around it is destroyed. And it's kind of like this visual, representation of like, man, there's two different approaches here. And so I always try to have sympathy for political leaders whenever there's these disasters, right? Like people will go back and they'll look at George Bush and they'll say like, the towers fell, and like, listen to his speech. And you're like, I don't know, man. I like, could you do better? Right? Like,
speech,
seems like people on the ground were like inspired by it. It's like easy to Monday morning quarterback. So same thing with whether it's Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, whoever. You got to say to yourself, like, this is a very difficult situation. But it comes back to, are you trying to help the majority of people, or are you being held hostage by the extremes? And I think that Newsom maybe is, he's seems to be making two mistakes on top of each other. One is the gender politics and all that kind of stuff. But two is most politicians don't understand economics.
Yeah.
And so, they just recently came out and they said, we're not going to let you sell your property. That's crazy.
Yeah, especially in LA.
Right? Like that's insane.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on a second. I bought a house. It's worth $5 million, right? So I get the house and the land. I'm the owner of the land.
Yeah.
And then the government comes in and says, you are not allowed to sell your house for less, or your land for less than what it was worth before the fire.
You made a point in one of your previous videos, which was like everything that Americans are mad about today is because of something that the government won't let them do. They're mad about all things free speech because government won't allow them to talk the way they want to talk. Like the point you made about housing. They're mad about finances because they won't let you trade crypto the way you should. Zooming out though, like there's this bigger point about institutional trust. Like I'm an immigrant. I came here like almost 10 years ago. The default settings view of America is that the basic shit works, right? Oh, trains will come on time. There won't be crimes on street. Wildfires, if there are wildfires, there are firefighters to fight the wildfires. The bigger point which I'm making post-COVID is like the usual stuff which you take for granted, those are coming into questions. And the point is, it should not though, because of how much people pay in taxes, because of the fact that it's the 5th largest economy in the world. What is your view regarding just basic level of competence among institutions today?
Institutions are just organizations made up of people. And so if you allow people who aren't competent to continue to rise in the hierarchy of the organization and they eventually become the leaders, well, if you have incompetent leaders, then you neuter the efficacy of the organization, and therefore people lose trust in it. And so some things are technology-based. For example, the media. It's really easy for people to say the media is saying X, I went on the internet, it says Y. Okay, that happens 3, 4, 5, 20 times.
Yeah.
Eventually you're like, I don't know how much trust I have in what the media says. I got to go do my own research. So there's that type of stuff that can happen. But really, if you go and you look, I always say to people, if you've ever been around a good leader, you're inspired by them.
Yeah.
They get you to do things you otherwise wouldn't do, right? It's like kind of the definition of leadership. Mm-hmm. How many people work inside some of these organizations? So take the LA firefighters. They are working their asses off right now, right? I have a number of people I've talked with that their sons, their brothers, their cousins, their uncles, all this stuff, right? Work in the LA fire department. I met with somebody recently who's in the New York fire department. We were talking about the LA fires, right? These guys are on the front lines trying to put out a fire. They don't give a shit who their leaders are, right? They're literally just focused on put this fire out. And I saw the same thing when I was deployed overseas. Like people are all, patriotism and all this stuff. Like patriotism is why you sign up. Patriotism is why you're excited to go. But when you're there and shit's popping off, you're like, bro, we're coming home. Like it's like the dude next to you, right? Like forget flags, forget all this shit. It's just like, let's get out of here, right? Like let's get out of this situation. And so same thing in kind of the heat of the battle of fighting the fires. Like you're just like, yo, put the fire out. I want to make sure that the guy I came here with is the guy I'm leaving with, right?
Yeah.
But if you go and you say to yourself, okay, let's take a poll of the LA Fire Department. How many of them think they have good leadership? My guess is it's a lower percentage than it used to be.
Yeah.
And so you say, okay, like that's one organization and one, field. But if you go through society and do that over and over and over again, it's like, okay, this is like a common theme here.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's this element of we need to bring back strong leadership. And strong leadership doesn't have to be the like bravado, right? Like if you're a cop, if you're a fireman, if you're, in the military, if you're the president, like, okay, I get like there's a reason and there's like a strategy to that. But a lot of organizations where like, you see somebody who's smart, right? Somebody who's strategic, somebody who's like, when they talk to you, you're like, okay, I want to follow this person.
Yeah.
And so that kind of strong leadership just seems like it completely fell out of the way because we stopped prioritizing who is the best person for the job. And now we pick a bit on like this other criteria that doesn't really matter.
These default settings of people. Most of my thinking is influenced by my first boss, who was Tucker Carlson. When I moved here 10 years ago, like he was the first guy I met, like literally 6 hours after I landed here from London. And he was writing this book at this time. It was called Ship of Fools. It was basically about the fact that the people who are in charge of you in any which vertical in American society today, they are no smarter than you are, most of them, and they have somehow figured out a way to climb the ladders of society, which is commendable in itself. But you should be allowed to question, hey, like, who are you? Like, why are you in charge of us? Like, make better decisions. And questioning the authority is kind of sort of like fundamental to like the American ethos. To that point today, having served in the military, what was the vibe back in the day regarding who are the people who are in charge of us today, and what is it today for the military? Because there was a lot of things in the news cycle regarding all things DEI taking over the military. Some of it I think was a little overstated, but there could be truth to that. What's your experience?
Yeah. Look, there's no one size fits all answer, right? When I was in the military, the big debate, which is still a debate, is should women serve in combat?
Yeah, Hegseth was talking about.
So, and I was fortunate to serve in the infantry, and it's a very male-dominated kind of testosterone-driven culture. These are men that are being asked to go do the dirty work of the military, and you then can go up the ranks, and you go from just the regular infantry to get the Rangers, and then you get the SEALs, you get the Green Berets, and kind of as you get further along that chain and kind of climb higher, they're doing dirtier and dirtier work, right? And so I think part of Hegseth's maybe kind of approach here is just like, what is the point of the military? It is to be able to fight wars, right? And if we have a strong military and a good war fighting capability, we should then be able to enjoy peace because nobody wants to mess with us. Pretty simple. If we are optimizing for other things, then maybe make different decisions. But if our goal is to have the best war fighting, kind of machine in the world, then put the best people, put the best war fighters there. And so I do think that there's an element of, it's obvious some portion of leadership is not optimizing for that. They are optimizing for something else. And so the question really is not so much who's right, who's wrong. It's just like, okay, everyone come in a room, get on the same page. What are we optimizing for? Do we want to be the best warfighting machine? Becomes crystal clear who should be in what roles. Do we want to be something else? Then we make different decisions. And I think that really right now, and what it seems like Trump has decided is he goes, I want the best warfighting machine. So who's the guy who wants to build the best warfighting machine? He's going to. Now, here's the thing that's crazy is I know a lot of people in the military who recently have gotten out, and pretty high senior ranking people, and they say to me all very similar things. We like the message. We hate the wrapping paper of it. The way he delivers it, the way that he kind of goes after the generals. No, Hegseth.
Okay, Hegseth.
Right. And they're like, but we agree we need the best warfighting. And so what that tells me is, again,
who cares? Even
when the message is right, people will still not like it. And so you have to say to yourself, you're never going to please everybody. Right. And I think that a good way to think about Hegseth is like, he looks like he's going to get an opportunity. He's about as close as you can get to kind of like a grunt becoming the Secretary of Defense. Like you would sit around and people would be like, oh, imagine if you were the Secretary of Defense, right? Like this guy's going to get a shot to do it. And, is he really a grunt? No, he's got, great accomplishments and all this stuff. But it's like, okay, wait a second. What if inside these organizations, what if you took the line firefighter and they got to be chief for 2 years? What different decisions would they make? Some of them would be bad decisions because they don't know what they don't know, right? But there's a lot of good decisions they probably would make. And if you look at companies, how many great company leaders and CEOs started out working in the company? Like maybe that's the type of stuff that we need, is to get these change agents into positions of power and influence by saying, hey, we know that you don't have the pedigree that normally somebody in this role would have, but that's okay.
Something which I'm personally excited about is we are returning to first principles. The point you made about hopefully, like it's like a systems building thing, right? What are you optimizing this for? And that's like the first question you ask before building any systems. And to that, I would say like the Zuckerberg interview with Trump recently, with Joe Rogan recently, which kind of came after his announcement that, hey, we're kind of going back to what Facebook is supposed to be, which is not a DEI company, but more often than not, it's a social network company. You're supposed to say what you want to say. And as someone who has worked in news companies, to give context, in the last 5 years, there was third-party fact-checking in Facebook, which basically means that you as a news company, if you say something, another news company, which has a fact-checking division, can fact-check you. And more often than not, those decisions ended up being on the more left side of the aisle, let's say. And now Facebook is saying that, no, we are a news company. People can say whatever they want to say. And to your point, they're going back to what are you optimizing Facebook to be? And they're optimizing it to be not a publisher, but a platform. What did you think of that interview and Facebook going back to its roots, per se?
Well, really, a lot of these companies, not just Facebook, but a lot of these companies, again, same thing that the local governments fell victim to. They fell victim to in these corporations, which is they got held hostage by the loud minority and the extremes. And so what they're saying is, wait a second, why are we letting the 5% dictate what the company does when 95% of the people here who went through our hiring process are incredibly intelligent, work hard, want to be successful, et cetera, are saying we should do something else? Let's go do that thing, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is, one of the things you saw in this last election cycle is the people who spent the most time talking about the most hardcore kind of culture war topics did not do very well.
Yeah.
Because mainstream America doesn't care. They don't care what the label on the bathroom is. They don't care about some, random thing that happens in some school in another state. They don't care about whether there are tampons in the bathroom or not for men at Facebook, right? What they are literally thinking to themselves is, I want to be able to live my life as free as possible. I want to spend it with my family and friends. I want to earn a living so I can have financial security, and I want to be happy.
Yeah, put food on the table, the basic.
Right. It's just like, look, I'm worried about my local, kind of situation. I don't care what's going on somewhere
else. Politics is local politics.
Now, if everyone says I don't care about those things, then obviously that becomes an issue, because then those things metastasize, right? And they grow through a society. And so you have to find this balance where somebody is willing to stand up. And if you think about, Brian Armstrong at Coinbase was probably the first public company CEO that I'm aware of to come out and say, we are a mission first company.
Yeah.
If it isn't focused on the mission, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care who you vote for. I don't care about your social justice issues. I don't care. Anything that is not mission focused, it has no place in this company. People now are like, that's the way to run a company. That was not in vogue when he did that 4 years ago.
Let's do a postmortem then. How do you think like that way of thinking kind of sort of took over corporations in general?
Well, it's really a return, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're a kid, every kid in America probably was told, like, don't talk about politics at work. Yeah. Right? Like, I mean, it was pretty don't talk to strangers, don't get in people's cars, and don't talk about politics at work, right? Basics. Like, very simple.
Yeah.
And so somewhere along the line, it changed. And I don't know if it was one event or many events or what, but it started to change. And, part of what I think—
Can I double click on that?
Yeah.
Like you said, you don't know what changed. I think I know, because I'm 28. When my peers, like we were graduating, there was this common thinking. It's like, okay, people who think like the Berkeley way of thinking, let's forget about them. The real world would take care of them. As it turns out, the real world did not took care of them, and they actually ended up working in corporations. And some of them are my coworkers. So I know exactly how they think and what is that way of thinking. And it all goes back to education and universities, where that way of thinking did not get churned out, especially in managerial positions. Mm-hmm. And that became the prevalent way of thinking for the last better half of the decade. And now we're coming back to normalcy.
Well, what's interesting about it is a lot of the nonsense that we've seen through society is because we are so fortunate.
Oh, yeah. I would know, yeah.
Right? I always talk about this clip that I saw, 50 Cent.
Yeah.
Somebody asked him about depression.
Yes.
And he said, depression's a luxury.
Yeah.
He says, where I come from, we don't have time to be depressed.
Yeah.
People have 2-3 jobs. They're single moms. They're trying to get food on, he went through the whole thing. And I never thought about it that way, where so many of these problems come because we are so prosperous, because we are so safe, because we are so fortunate. And so when you think of it through that lens, you say, wait a second. Imagine people around the world having the luxury of time to argue over what's on the bathroom door.
Yeah.
They would be like, we're rich.
Yeah.
We're rich,
we
right? like we have arrived. And so there's this whole other element of part of the challenges we face comes out of the success that we've achieved.
Yeah.
And, it's the classic, how do you get someone to appreciate the success that we have or the opportunity that we have? They kind of have to go through hard things. Yeah. And there's a cohort of America that was kind of insulated from difficulty. And if you go and you talk to them and you say, hey, what are the difficult experiences that you've had? They're not very high. And so it goes back to, well, why? It's because we built this umbrella where we said, hey, everyone is going to be safe. There is no risk. Everyone is going to be, treated in a way, regardless of whether your ideas are right or not. Everyone gets the participation trophy. There's no winning and losing, right? You just go through this stuff and you say, oh my God. Society basically realized that rather than picking winners and losers, whether it is in business, in your personal life, in, your hobbies, whatever, we went to everyone can be a winner. And I think now society is rejecting that idea and saying, wait a second, there has to be some sort of negative feedback loop for if you do something that is a dumb idea, or if you have an idea that the people don't agree with, you have to get that feedback. And that's the only way you can get better. That's the only way you can learn. That's the only way you can course correct and kind of get back on course. So I think about, imagine if I grew up, everyone won everything and nobody ever, how how many times the teacher pulled me aside and was like, you're fucking up right now. Like you can't be doing this, right? If they instead were just like, oh, okay. Like, the equivalent of like gentle parenting, right? Yeah. Like, oh, you're great. You're doing a great job. I'd have been a maniac, right? Like who knows what I would have went and did. So you need that negative feedback to get you back on track. And I think that's ultimately what society is saying. It's like, hold on a second. Yeah. We don't want to be everything to everybody. We don't want to have everyone get the participation trophy. Let's bring back merit. Let's bring back kind of the picking of winning winners and losers. And we're going to be in a much better position.
Staying on that for a while, and I want to come back to politics. In your new book, you wrote a bunch of letters to your kids. What are some of those core fundamentals about, hey, you're born in America, this is a great country, while at the same time, there is better to strive for. And you obviously, I'm pretty sure you don't want to coddle them, but I'm pretty sure you're doing well as a family and they would be taken care of. What is that balance, especially that you're thinking of right now in terms of raising your kids?
Yeah, look, I don't think any parent in the world wants their kid to suffer. Yeah. Right? Every parent wants their kid to live a better life than they live. They want them to have more opportunity. They want them to be happier. They want them to, have less stress. But there is this kind of healthy level of whether it's stress or difficulty or obstacles or whatever. Sports is a great way to introduce your kid, right? I always say that it doesn't matter what your education level is or your wealth status or anything. When you get on a basketball court,
it's an equalizer.
Yeah. You're either good or you're not. Can you put the ball in the hoop or not, right? Yeah. And so it's a way to manufacture winning and losing and a lot of hard work and dedication, all that stuff. So I think sports is a very simple way. I think another thing is when you live in dense urban areas like New York City, you get exposed to the extremes. Yeah. You see the wealthiest of the wealthy, and you see the poorest of the poor. And so understanding that there is, kind of this variation out there, I think is pretty important. And then also it's kind of another component of that is like traveling, going and seeing how do other people live, perspective, right? You start to understand like, wait a minute, what we have is pretty good. Right. And, I can't tell you how many countries I've gone to, and somewhere along the trip, you realize something that you're used to doing, you shouldn't do that here, right? There are certain countries where you may not want to tweet certain things, right? In the U.S., you can pretty much tweet all kinds of stuff and you're for the most part going to be okay. And so I think that just it's how do you expose them to those ideas?
Would you say the majority of your worldview is kind of sort of molded by the fact that you have seen what not living in the U.S. looks like?
I think it's a big part. Yeah. I mean, look, there are a ton of experiences that make up your worldview, right? Yeah. And for me, I grew up in a big family. I had 5 boys in my family. And so you naturally are exposed to somewhat of a competitive environment. I always joke that, when I go on television, people are like, how do you, kind of banter back and forth? I'm like, I've been doing this my whole life. I got 4 brothers. We talk shit every day, all day long, right? Yeah. It's like, practice for that. But also the military was a big part, and you get kind of, even though during training domestically, you basically are taken out of any environment that you would have normally been in. So your local area where you picked to go to college, all that stuff, you get picked up and put with a bunch of people from all over the country that go there. And you literally have, the farm boy, you've got, the guy from Southern California, you got the guy who, is from Texas, and then you got the guy who lives in some town you never heard of before, whatever. And they're all together. You got to learn how to do that. But you also hear what was their experience like, and you learn and you do all that stuff. Traveling's a big component of it. But also I think reading, is a huge piece as well. And so you're basically able to borrow the worldviews of all these other people and try to figure out how you think about it. And if you kind of put those experiences together, what you realize is it's really just reps, right? How do you get as many reps as possible? Well, if you live the same life your entire life, you only got one rep, right? You just did it over and over and over again. And so, yeah, sure. Bruce Lee says, fear the man that's done one kick 10,000 times. Yeah. He wasn't talking about world experience, right? He wasn't talking about somebody who kind of just has that single focus. And so I think that having a lot of variation is really important, and it shows up in your friend group. That's the other thing is I used to always laugh that if I go out to a bar and I see a group of guys standing there, I can tell a lot about those people, especially if I see them 3 or 4 times. Yeah. Because then it's like, okay, this is your friend group. It's not like, hey, I'm out with my work buddies for one time a month or whatever, right? And if they all look the same, dress the same, act the same accents, all that stuff, you're like, okay, it's very kind of homogenous. But there are some people, like if you were to go and say, hey, who are the 10 friends I spend the most time talking to? Almost every single one of them is an immigrant. Yeah. Right. And so my wife always laughs. She's like, I don't understand. Like I have a friend from Italy. I have a friend from Mexico. I have a friend from Puerto Rico. I have a friend from Panama. I have a friend, like all this stuff. Right. And she's like, they're all Americans. Yeah. But that helps to determine a different worldview than maybe just hey, if I stayed and I just hung out with my friends from North Carolina, we're all the same, right? Like we all just have the same view. We have the same experience. We went to the same high school. We say, whatever. And so I do think that the introducing that variation is really important. And it shows up, I think, in politics, because what you start to realize is that other countries are way more racist than America.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like
way more racist.
I've been to, I went to school in the UK, and we used to go to like soccer games all over Europe. And trust me.
How'd that go?
It's right. You don't want to listen to those chants.
Correct. Yeah. and then you say to yourself, okay, well, what about some of the, non-race based social programs, right? Or some of the other, things that people would put in the kind of policy bucket. Yeah. America's actually doing pretty well compared to a lot of other places. Yeah. Right. And so, again, that doesn't mean we can't improve. It doesn't mean we don't have problems. But when you're exposed to that stuff, you start to realize, like, hold on a second here. I've seen real racism. Yeah. Are there racist people in America? Of course. Yeah. There's racist people in every country. But what's going on in XYZ country compared to here? Whole different ball game.
Done a pretty good job here. Yeah.
And look, and I think that's part of why people want to come to this country. Yeah. It's also why people try to exploit this country. Yeah. Right? It's because we've done such a good job. And so you have to say to yourself, again, we're never going to have all of the answers for everybody. We're never going to make everyone happy. But how do we do better than we did yesterday and keep trying to answer, the questions or the challenge for the majority of people? And we should keep trying to make that bigger and bigger and bigger, but the majority of people should be the one dictating the policies. That's why we live in a democratic process instead of being held hostage by the extremes.
Speaking of the majority of people, obviously you spoke a lot leading up to all things election. Inaugurations is less than a week due. What are your big picture expectations come next administration? And before we do that, let's do like a quick postmortem, because you said, hey, most people actually don't want to vote on, like culture or topics or whatever. However, this last election was a balance of two, and that's my read. One was like, it's a vibe selection. Trump is all things MAGA, Hulk Hogan on stage. Kamala is all things kind of sort of like a Obama 2.0 resurrection, while Kamala's campaign did a pretty good job staying away from transgender stuff, tampons in the bathroom kind of stuff. What's your read on why he won and why she lost?
So I think it was 2 or 3 weeks before the election. I was trying very hard not to make a prediction. Yeah. And I slipped up in a podcast and I said, I think that Trump's going to win by a landslide. And I was like, well, hopefully just people didn't hear that, right? Like move on with my day, whatever.
And I'll make clip again. Yeah.
And I was talking to my brother like 2 days before the election, and I said, I think he's going to win so bad that he may win the popular election. Yeah. And I said, and if that happens, he may flip New York red. So it wasn't 100%, right? He didn't flip New York red, but like definitely directionally, whatever. But I went back and I thought to myself, why did I think that it was going to be such a big win? Not just a win, but a big win. And I came to the conclusion that I did not hear a single person I knew who had been on the right who said, I'm switching to the left.
Yeah.
But I heard a lot of people say, I'm, historically a Democrat and I'm going to the right. And so I started to think, why did that happen? And I think that there really was, from the parties, not even the candidates, but from the parties, there was approach on one side of what I'll call weakness. We're going to show up. We're going to ask for you to do stuff. We're going to show up and we're going to cater to the extremes. We don't have a point of view. We don't want to offend anyone. It's kind of like we're everything to everybody type situation. Versus the other parties showed up and said, these things are very important to us. We think they're critical to the success of our nation. We are vehemently focused on defending these ideals. If you're offended by it, we don't care. That was the election.
Dichotomy, yeah.
Right? And you can look at the candidates. I actually think the candidates were more similar than people realize, right? They both were extreme previously and they started to come to the center. I think that they both were playing the social media game in different ways. I think that they both were trying to go after the same voter base. And that's part of why they were getting pulled to the middle. It's like they knew who was going to end up determining the election. And so if you look at that, you say to yourself, people just want strength.
Yeah.
That's ultimately all it came down to. They want to feel secure. They want to feel like there's financial opportunity. They want to feel like the future is brighter than the past. And they want to feel like the person who's in office is willing to fight for them. And you literally had a guy who got shot on stage and stood up and said, fight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's like pretty simple.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, you say to yourself, okay, bring that lesson from the national stage down to the state and local stage. And if you go across the country, I personally think that the New York City mayor race that's upcoming is going to be the single most important race in the entire country because it will dictate and tell us what is the temperature
to litmus test
in the blue states.
Yeah.
Because if a Republican gets elected as mayor of New York City, that's going to tell you that California is in play, that California could turn red.
What do you think, what do you make of like the whole, this is the end of the liberal order? And that doesn't mean that progressivism is over. My analysis, especially as an outsider in this country, is that the country needs both. And a good amount of balance is actually good. You need people who think more right brain focused, who can actually influence, hey, these are the things we can do better. Here are the improvements. While you also need the people who are left brain focused, who can, set up systems, make sure the trains come on time, make sure there's no crime on the street. What do you think that balance should be right now, given the point that there was a pretty, loud recognition from the countries that, hey, for a long time, we've had this, things are not working, let's try something else?
I think that we definitely need right and left, but we need other parties or perspectives as well. And so there's obviously the independents, there's, a number of different perspectives at the table, because I do think that different perspectives ends up making us better. I didn't say different, backgrounds or races or gender or whatever, but like actual different mindsets. And so you could take two people that look identical, they grew up in the same environment, same skin color, same gender, whatever, and they'd have very differing views. You put them at a table and you start to talk through something and they have different ways of looking at it, and that makes the whole group better. And so I think that's really, really important. One of the things that struck me during the election is that the right has a number of young stars that seem poised, and you can see kind of the future of the Republican Party for the coming years. The left has a couple, but nowhere near kind of the stable that the right has. And so I do think that there has to be kind of a refresh. And I actually think that the landslide kind of popular vote victory that Trump got is going to be a gift to the Democrats, because if it was a close election, they say, if we spent a little bit more money, if we had done this, whatever. It was such a rejection of kind of the left's current state that it is going to force them to make changes. And so if you think about the leaders on both sides of the aisle, they're old.
Yeah.
And so you're naturally going to get some young people. But I think what the left really is going to benefit from is having some smart, capable, competent young people step up and say, hey, listen, I still believe in these values and I'm willing to go and do this. And if you look on the right, J.D. Vance, Vivek, right? You go down the line of all these people who kind of showed up. no one would expect them to be the ones going into politics, right? Even the Joe Rogans, the Elon Musk, like what are these people involved in politics for? Again, your parents told you never talk about politics, right? So I think what the left needs is they need that group. Now, one thing that I will say, which people will have to go look up because they will not believe me. There are an increasing number of academic studies that show political spectrum association, where you are on the political spectrum, may be associated with your testosterone levels. So there was a study done where they introduced exogenous testosterone, external testosterone that was put into people's body, and they tested it in males. They all shifted right. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that you went from, hardcore left-leaning Democrat to a hardcore right-leaning Republican. Yeah. But on their political spectrum, they all shifted to the right. So if you say to yourself for a second, okay, then, and again, very anecdotal, but there's a left-leaning podcast where they went and on the episode, they all took their testosterone measurements. They were talking about it. And if I remember the numbers correctly, it's like 300 to 800 or 300 to 1,000 is the recommended safe level of testosterone in your body.
Milligrams?
I think so. Yeah. And these guys, all three of them were below 300 and two of them were below like 150. Yeah. Like medically dangerous levels of lack of testosterone, right? And so again, like it's an anecdote or whatever, but it reinforces this generalization. And so you say to yourself, well, hold on a second, what did people vote for? They voted for strength associated with the testosterone, right? And in a society where testosterone is falling, actually the higher testosterone kind of right-leaning was what people selected. Now go back in ancient Rome, go back in many times in history. Who did they vote? Who can protect me?
Especially in times of crisis.
Of course. Who can protect me, right? Bad times, I need strong men. Like that has been the story of history, right? And in good times, I let the weak men run the place, right? But like that is the story of history. And so again, it's not perfect. There's plenty of, examples of people who, are on the left who are great leaders and all this stuff. But I think that what you're starting to see is the left is also learning from the right. So the right learned from the left in many ways. I think Obama really opened the kind of a new generation to some things. But Harris Wall's hats.
I know.
I never seen those before.
The camo hats like catering to the Midwest foot. I was
pretty smart.
Yeah, pretty smart.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there and you're objectively looking at it, you're saying, okay, this obviously is working for the right.
Yeah.
Pretty smart of the left to copy it. Right? If you look at people like Hakeem Jeffries, Ro Khanna, right? Rishi Torres, people like that, right? They are definitely using a lot of the same tactics that the right used on social media, and it's working. Yeah. Right. And I never thought that I would hear a John Fetterman or a Ro Khanna come out and already be criticizing things with the LA fires or saying, hey, I'm not just a senator to the Philadelphia or to the Pennsylvanian Democrats. I'm a senator to the whole state. Yeah. Both sides of the aisle. Like these are things that I hope what we are seeing is the country is kind of pulling back into the center a little bit. Yeah. And you're realizing that people on the right say, hey, we were being kind of stifled. We were being censored. We were being all this stuff. It's really important that Trump doesn't go after the left.
Yeah, that's super important. And staying on like all things testosterone, there are headlines about, like Zuckerberg going on Rogan and saying that, hey, like we were neutered as a company, not just corporations, like American culture in general. There needs to be a fair amount of resetting. Well, hey, like masculinity is cool, not all masculinity is toxic and all that stuff. You have forever been in male-dominated environments, be that a house with 5 dudes or like serving in the military. What do you think, like if you had to convince someone who's a naysayer, it's like, hey, no, we actually need to set up systems? Because, okay, let's be honest. If I had a daughter, I would want her to feel comfortable in a corporation because, hey, like maybe like she has stuff to offer. She should not feel stifled because she's not a man. Mm-hmm. While at the same time, there are things about quote unquote default settings, male behavior, which is aggression, going after what you want. What do you think is the fair balance, not just in a person, but in a bigger system?
Well, in a system, I think it's important to say, I'm using one example to kind of, explain a story, but I don't think that it is only men, right? If you look at, if I said to you, hey, name 3, killers that are women, just people that you're like, I can give them any task, they're going to get it done.
Yeah.
It's the same qualities that if I said, hey, name 3 killers that are men, right?
Margaret Thatcher.
It is the ability to be a self-starter. They work hard. They're persistent, right? They're intelligent. Like you just go through, it's the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
And if you look actually, I can speak from my own personal portfolio, right? In the very first fund that I had, the best companies are all run by women.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, I didn't have a mandate to go invest in. I just was investing in who are the best founders that we can find, best companies, ideas, whatever. Invested in like 25% of the fund is in women, and the best performing companies are run by women. Okay, I don't give a shit if they're men, women, whatever, right? It's just like, hey, can you go and accomplish the mission? And so I think that is one of the misnomers is people say like, oh, one group is left behind or another group or whatever. Instead, it is, think about it from, I don't know if you've seen this show, Love is Blind.
Yeah, the Netflix show.
My wife loves this show. I think it's stupid, but she loves this show. And so whenever I see it on, I'm good. I'm going to go read a book, right? I love her, but it's a dumb show, right? And so, but imagine if you ran a company that way, right? Imagine if you couldn't see what the person looked like, but it was just like you did all the interviews, you never got to see them, and you simply just picked the person who was best.
Yeah.
You probably would have a killer company, right? Who cares? Men, women, blah, blah, whatever. Right? Just pick the best people.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about that is I think that companies have become aware that, hey, we need to get the largest applicant pool possible. And there may be issues with top of funnel in terms of getting people into that pool. But, there are examples now. I mean, what is it? I think the state of New Jersey, the teachers don't have to take the literacy test.
Oh, that's
I mean, that's like okay, hold on. I have a 3-year-old. She could read a couple words.
Yeah.
Like, I hope the teachers can too, right? How's she going to learn to read? Like, come on, right? Then there was a story, I forget where it was, but there were some female officers who have started in higher numbers into the police force, but they had changed the standards. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you start to get into issues is, you go back and you look at, what was the critiques when Trump got shot? It was that the female Secret Service agents weren't tall enough to protect him. Yeah. I'm sure they're super competent. Yeah. I'm sure that they know exactly what they're doing. They're just as smart, just as hardworking, all this stuff. But from a physical standpoint, if he says he's 6'4", maybe he's like 6'2", right? But like whatever, it's 6'4", you got to be taller than him, right? You got to be bigger than him. You got to be able to protect him. That's part of the job.
To be a body shield,
Yeah, and so I do like, I forget who said it, but somebody was basically like, look, if you think about sports teams, nobody in the NBA is like, I know that, you're a little shorter, you can't dribble as well, but like, come on, we need somebody, right? It's like, no, like you put the best people out there. Yeah. And so I think that returning to that in corporate life, but also in society, right? I always, I was very bothered by the Daniel Penny situation.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the Daniel Penny situation to me, I think what bothered me was I was like, that could have been me. Right. There have been multiple times living in New York City where something is going on and it could just be somebody just being belligerent and me stepping in and saying, chill out, or, hey, somebody needs help or whatever. I have no clue, right, what I would have done in that situation. But I sat there and I said to myself, hold on a second. If my wife and my kids were on that subway, I hope Daniel Penny's on there. Yeah. I hope that he steps in and helps them. And I think that there's a lot of people in New York City that felt the same way. Yeah. And so you say to yourself, okay, again, could other people do that? But it isn't a coincidence to me that it's a guy who is in the Marines, who's a young dude, right? Like you check all these boxes, you're like, of course that's the guy. If you looked at the whole subway car and you had to pick before the incident, who's the guy most likely to step in? It's probably that guy,
it's
right?
An art student from NYU who's coming back. Yeah.
And so it goes back to, for society to be functioning, you can't just have a bunch of like jacked testosterone-ridden dudes, right? You also need women. Yeah. You also need children. You also need people who do different occupations. Yeah. You need people who have different experiences, speak different languages. Like you want to be a well-rounded society, but for certain types of roles, you want people who have certain skills, certain experience, certain kind of predispositions. And in politics, it is literally the leader. Yeah. And so if you want to have strong leaders, then you've got to go find people who are strong leaders elsewhere and then vote them into office. But I don't know if that was happening for the last couple.
Speaking of the GOP tent right now, you said Vivek, you said Vance. I think something which I'm personally stoked about the fact that all of these people who are in the Republican tent today, they all kind of sort of agree on the basics and they have variations in the edges. Like you saw the Vivek's tweet about immigration, people disagreeing on that. The point being, all things Republican Party today, especially come this administration, is a bigger tent where everyone's like, okay, we stand for the basic shit. We want this country to win. We want people who are working hard to actually win in life. We want inflation to go down. We want the border to be safe. We want crime to go down. Whereas there, I think, is a fundamental disagreement on what it means to be a Democrat today, because there's the Bernie faction, then there's like the, let's call it, Liz Warren and Nancy Pelosi faction. What's your read on all things coalition building and what Republicans did right, in my opinion, and what the Democrats did wrong?
So I don't know if I would agree that one kind of is completely a big tent and the other is kind of fractured, because I think you still have like a Mitt Romney, right, and a Donald Trump. I don't think that they're very, there's a huge overlap of things that they would say they agree on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there are still these factions even inside the Republican Party. But I do think that there's at least a little bit more coalition than obviously on the left. And so if you look at this, a great, kind of proxy for this conversation is, are you willing to sacrifice for the success of the country?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of people on the right who the answer is yes. They are willing to close the border. They are willing to live with higher prices. They are willing to do certain things. And I always wonder, do they know that they're willing to do that stuff? Right? If you're cheering on tariffs and that leads to higher prices, do you know you're cheering for higher prices, right? Or do you just like the idea of America's strength and, kind of pushing back against these countries? Unclear. But that's like a core, that is a lesson from history, is like the greatest nations, they pulled people together. They all sacrificed together as a group in order to get strength and success as a group. And so it just comes back to what portion of the policies are about me versus about the whole. And the truth is that both political parties have some that are in either category. But I do think that the Republican Party, in a weird way, has evolved and morphed, and somehow now is the party of the working class. You see this with Hispanic vote. You see this with blue collar job vote. You see this with many different ways that you could measure kind of the working class vote. But they're also the party of the wealthy, and tax cuts, and kind of all the normal Republican things. And so you say, that's really unique. And so my maybe open question at the moment, is it Trump or is it the Republican Party? I don't know, right? But when Trump can no longer be president, Vance seems to be an extension of Trump. So, okay, how many more people could hold both of those ends of the spectrum together?
To give more context to what he's saying, when I was graduating from school, the whole worldview was Democrats is the party which was, Bill Clinton, working class, blue collar, Michigan. That was the party, whereas Republicans are the party of, Ronald Reagan, tax cuts. Like that was the overarching binary way of looking at parties. Whereas today, like you said, Republicans is all things, more Latinos shifting towards the party, whereas at the same time, people like Marco Andreessen are going MAGA. What do you think is like, okay, let's stay on that for a while. I work in media. I have friends in tech. That's like the world I live in. When I first, was coming of age, I knew the prevalent way of thinking in Silicon Valley and people who run things in all things finance and in tech was that of, liberalism, Obama, and all that stuff. How do you cut to today? It's changed. You have all these headlines about Zuckerberg going MAGA. If someone is working in one of those environments today, how do you think they should actually focus on doing their job, given the fact that there are so many different voices politically coming their way?
I think it's really hard, right? We live in a society where the internet has given us such a deluge of information. and is constantly just, berating us with it on a day-to-day basis, that I don't know if you can separate it.
Yeah.
And so, look, we run a number of businesses. I think a lot about, what is the environment that I want to create. And we have people who are Republicans, we have people who are Democrats, we have people who are independents, and we have people who don't even know what they are.
Yeah.
Right. Frankly, we got some young people who they're like, I don't know. Like, tell me an issue and I'll tell you what I think type thing. Right. And so when you think through that, you say to yourself, an easy question: do I want them talking about politics at work? Actually, yeah, I'm okay with them doing it, because we have a smaller team and we don't have anyone with extreme views. And therefore, there can be rational conversation. But if I ran a team of 2,000 people, probably wouldn't have the same thoughts, because now the odds are that you have people who are kind of more extreme in their views just by the number of people that work at your company. And therefore, you go away from let's have a rational conversation and all try to learn to now I am advocating.
Yeah.
Now I am trying to get the company to do something.
Yeah.
In the conversations that we have around the office, nobody is trying to convince me to do anything, or I'm not trying to convince them or anything. It's just, how do you guys think about this? And having those different perspectives is really valuable. It's really important, right? Because there are times where I will go to certain people and I will bring up a topic, not because I want their opinion, right? I actually think their opinion is probably not right. I want to hear what they think, because it tells me what is the information that somebody who is not me, in a different, kind of echo chamber, what information are they getting? And so one of the easy ones is AOC at the Capitol on January 6th. Like, I think a lot of people that are like terminally online, et cetera, there was this whole like controversy, right? And she spoke some words, unclear whether she was insinuating or not or whatever. But like, it became clear after that whole dust up of like, okay, she wasn't there.
Yeah.
Great. Like a fact was agreed on by everyone, move on. Never even thought about it again. Right. And like, frankly, I don't think people like should like hold it against her or whatever. Right. We're having a conversation and somebody in our office was like, something. And it came up that she wasn't there. And like, what? Yes, she was. And it was like, you want to bet, type thing. Right. And like you go to AI, right. Gives you the answer. You're like, no, that can't be right. Then you go to Google, right. Go look for the whatever. And this person was shocked. Like they felt like they had almost been like tricked by, the media stories and like all the stuff and everything. And so my takeaway from that explicit example was just like, oh, a lot of the people in this office are terminally online. we have a viewpoint on the world that is so different than, some other subgroup. And so like remain intellectually humble and remember that like what you think is not what everyone thinks they know.
Yeah.
And so it was this great reminder. And I'm like, this person works in our office.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like they're, live in Iowa, right? Which I always like to give shit to Iowa, but like, it is just a completely different situation. And so I think, again, exposure to these different ideas.
Speaking
is really
of like expressing your politics, when you stepped into all things content and making videos, you did not ask for this genre of content, nor were you intending on growing in this direction, but it so happened that you chose to go this way. And you were saying that, hey, like, whatever, like you were the crypto guy. And today, when you are obviously getting flagged from different directions because people did not expect this from you, how do you think about what you signed up for vis-a-vis all things content and the fact that you decided to speak up in the way that you did?
I don't think I've spoken up, frankly, right? Like, I think that I probably more today than maybe 2 or 3 years ago talk about some of these issues. I tend to talk about them through the lens of the economy and kind of finance and money, because, frankly, the truth is that if you look at the stock market or finance, probably one of the single most important things is what are our politicians going to do about the national debt?
Yeah.
They continue to spend like drunken sailors. They're going to drive the national debt up. That means we have to debase the currency. It means 50% of the citizens are going to get hurt because they have no investable assets. So in a weird way, like the politicians' lack of discipline pulled a lot of people that were just trying to live their life as business people or investors into paying attention about politics. And so that has definitely been, something that maybe some of us, have had to do kind of kicking and screaming. I frankly don't really care that much about politics.
Yeah.
Like, but I really care about investing. I really care about building businesses. Like that is my passion. That's what I'm excited about. It's just now that those two things have become, on this like crash course and they've intersected. And so paying attention. What I will say though is maybe I have gained some confidence in speaking about some of these topics, mainly because other people won't. And, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I don't work inside of a large corporation where if I say something, I may get fired, right? I have a degree of resiliency to if I say something, I can stand behind it. And if people come after me for it, maybe they're right. Let me listen. Maybe they know something I don't know, right? Maybe they could change my mind. But also if I just disagree with them and they think I'm stupid, then okay, let's, go to sleep tonight, wake up tomorrow. Let's go back to, do whatever. And so I think the Daniel Penny situation, again, it was eating at me for a long time. I probably typed out a tweet and deleted it no less than 20 times.
Yeah.
I remember talking to my wife about it. I talked to my brother about it. And I was like, man, I really want to say something, but like, I just don't know, maybe I don't have all the facts. I don't want to somehow interject myself into this thing, whatever. And then finally one day, without saying anything to any of them, I just sat there and I was like, I will regret this for the rest of my life if I don't say anything.
Yeah.
And I typed it out and I hit publish. And all of a sudden my wife called me and she goes, well, I guess that was coming out regardless. She's like, I guess you were sending that one, right? And it felt like 1,000 pounds were lifted off my shoulder.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden my phone started blowing up.
Oh boy.
It was all my friends.
Yeah.
It was all these people I knew. And they were saying, I appreciate you saying something. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I can't believe this is happening. Thank you. I feel more comfortable saying something. And all of a sudden I was like, hold on a second. All of us are sitting here and it's like nobody wants to say anything. Everyone's like looking around, whatever. And then I said something and then here we go.
Yeah.
Right. And that's only in my little circle, of the internet. And there was somebody else who said one in the political one. And there was somebody else who said one over here. And you're like, why are we all sitting here not saying anything? We all agree on this. This is pretty common sense stuff. And so that's where I was like, oh, wait a second. We're all self-censoring ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And, look, there are still things that happen that I'm like, it's just not worth it. Right. It's just, it's not going to have an impact. It is kind of part of the machine. No matter how hard anyone rails against it, it's not going to matter. But there are certain things that I think are areas where the people's voice will eventually be heard. And if you've got a platform to speak, on one hand, you probably have a responsibility to talk about it, but also it's a great way to learn.
Yeah.
And there's times where, the LA fire situation, I've said stuff and people have commented back. And one guy said, hey, my son's a firefighter and this is going on, blah, blah, whatever. And I say, hey, I still believe what I said, but that's a really interesting data point, and I messaged him, I said, I'd like to learn more about this. And you realize that in a weird way, putting your thoughts out there serves as a magnet. It attracts all these people. And sure, are there idiots that, come out and say all kinds of dumb stuff? Of course. But what you're looking for is the rational people who, want to have a conversation, whether they agree with you or not, because you probably both can learn from each other. And that's the power of the internet.
Shifting away from politics a little bit. I'm personally passionate about all things work culture. You have worked in companies of different sizes. You have observed company both from inside and outside. I'm 28. When I was working, I experienced COVID like most people did. And I observed a couple of things which were fascinating to me personally, and I want your take on this. There was the rise of all things quiet quitting and Gen Z's approach to work. There are people working outside today. A lot of people have this different view and different relationship of what it means to work, what their relationship is to work, what they get out of it, and zooming out, the American dream in general, which is under question. As you work with people and incubate other people who want to, let's say climb ladders or whatever, how do you view their take on, hey, what's your relationship with work? What do you want to do? And how do you think that has changed post-COVID?
Compete, don't complain. That's pretty much it, right? If you don't work, you don't get the option to complain.
Yeah.
And so I wear suit and tie every day to work.
Yeah.
We make our team come into the office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
There's no remote work. There's none of the, nonsense stuff, whatever. Is that for everybody? No. If you're not excited about that, that's okay.
Why do you think that's imperative for her to set that culture?
when I was growing up, I always thought of two very simple things. If I get to the office before my boss and I leave the office after my boss, that's step one.
Yeah.
Step two is my boss should never work harder than me,
Yeah.
right? Because if I'm working harder than my boss, then their life is probably easier. It means I'm learning. It means, all this stuff, whatever. And if you notice, nobody else is wearing a suit and tie here, right? But that's okay, right? I tell them you don't have to do that, but you do got to come in.
Yeah.
You do have to be here. You do have to work hard, right? You do have to do this stuff. And what it ultimately does is it goes back to the idea of sacrifice. Working from home is great for the individual. Of course, right? I roll out of bed. Maybe I eat. Maybe I shower. Maybe I don't.
Yeah.
I go over to my computer, type out some emails. Oh, I got to go, pick up my laundry. Oh, I got to go, lunch here, right? Do all this stuff. It's a much easier life. So it's great for me. I have a lot more flexibility. I can kind of do things at my own pace, etc. But is it better for the organization? Probably not. And so we see it. We've had times where, when we moved back to New York, we didn't have an office and we were working remote. We went into the office, productivity shot through the roof. And so you say to yourself, hold on a second. If remote work is much better for the individual, which 100% it is, there are certain jobs and certain people who that's what they're optimizing for. Hey, I want to have a flexible lifestyle. I want to have this. I want to have that. Whatever. Great. You're just, for our companies, you're probably not the right person. And I don't want you to do something you're not happy with, right? What I am looking for, though, are people who buy into the team and say, I'm willing to sacrifice so that us collectively do better. That becomes really interesting, right? And so part of that is we should all be together. We should be able to walk over to each other and talk. We should be able to pick up the little nuances that if we're not on the Zoom call, we don't know what's going on or whatever, right? People come in and out of this office all day long, right? And some of them are super successful people. Some of them are people no one's ever heard of before. But if you're in the office, you get to meet them. You get to see them. You may be sitting in a meeting with them, do all these different things. And so what it does is it flips from, hey, we're optimizing for our people to be kind of in the best situation to we are optimizing for the organization to be in the best situation. And I look at myself as I am the protector of the organization, right? I am here to protect the culture, the mission, the operations, et cetera. And so if that's the ultimate goal, then what we have to be able to do is all collectively buy in and say, each one of us is going to sacrifice. Would I love to be at home hanging out with my kids all the time? Of course, that'd be awesome. Yeah. But there's a little bit of sacrifice so that the total sum of all of our sacrifice is a much better place.
The reason I want to talk about that is, you have a smaller team comparison to bigger companies. And a lot of my friends specifically, who are, 25 or younger or 28 in that age range, they have realized that the whole thing is not worth it, right? The only reason I don't relate to that is because I'm an immigrant and my default settings is different than questioning the American whatever. But
what's not worth it?
This whole thing, going to work, chasing it all, promotion, what the fuck am I working for if I can buy a house at any point because it's all a dream at this point. Let's just burn it down. What's the American dream? The American dream is basically being able to give your kids the better life than you had, have a house, retire, golden Rolex, all of that stuff. They're realizing that going to a job, hustling for your boss is not getting me anywhere closer to that. What say you?
Well, there are certain jobs where that's true.
Yeah.
But also, if you want to live a certain way, you have to take risk. You have to make the decisions and take the actions that put you on that path. So, it's kind of like, you can't have $1 million dream with a 50K work ethic.
Yeah.
Right. It's just those two, they don't work. Right. And so you can have a 50K dream with $1 million work ethic.
Yeah.
Right. That works. Yeah. But the other way, it just doesn't work. Right. And so there is two things that I think are really important. The first is there's a lot of people, and frankly, I'm very fortunate that I was able to kind of figure it out, but I would even put myself in this category for a long time, is they kind of just do the next thing in the step in front of them. And so they say, okay, I went to high school. Now I'm supposed to go to college. What college am I supposed to go to? Let me take the SAT. Let me apply. Okay, I got into these 3. Let me go online. Which one's got cool parties? Which one's close to my house?
Yeah.
Like, also, how much does it cost? Can I get a scholarship? They go through this whole thing, right? And they pick. And then only once they're in the school do they say, okay, what am I going to study? Oh, I wanted to study business, but the college doesn't have a business school.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll study accounting, right? Like, that's close.
Yeah.
I mean, like, literally, right? Like, there's a lot of people who do that. And so you get on this track, and what it is, like, there's no kind of longer term thinking. Like, what do I want to do? And when you're young, it's okay because you might not know. I didn't know, right? But then when you get out of college, okay, I need a job. I applied to 20, 2 responded, 1 gave me an offer. I'll go do X. Fine. It's a job. And then you're like, but I'm only getting paid, $60K. And after taxes, that's all my rent and food. So I have no money. And you're like, okay, if you want more money, you got to go make more money.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so either get a better job, figure out something on the side, whatever. But like, I call it the 5 o'clock turnoff.
Okay.
If you live your life and you turn off your economic production at 5 o'clock, how much money can you make from 9 to 5? There's only so much money that you're going to be able to make, right? And guess what? If you only want to work 9 to 5, then that is probably only so many roles that you can fill where they need someone to work from an economic production standpoint from 9 to 5. Instead, if you think of every single person, literally, I cannot think of one person that I have ever met that has been hyper successful that is not already saying, hey, I'm working, immense hours. It's just time, right? And what you're doing is you're producing whatever the thing is. You could be a musician, you could be an athlete, you could be a business person, you could be an investor, whatever. You're producing economic value for hours and hours and hours. Of course, you're going to make more money. And so people look at hard work like, oh, well, I need to have a life. Okay. But there's trade-offs in life. And so if you say, I want to stop my economic production at 5 o'clock and not think about it again until 9 tomorrow, you could do that. But you're only going to get a certain reward for it because the value you're providing from an economic standpoint is not worth more.
I want to push back, but I also want you to know that I agree with you, just as a mental exercise. The complaint is that we should design a society where the people who want to switch off after 5 p.m., they should be able to live, a happy, successful life, especially in America.
Okay, go design that. Show me any place in America or in the world where people are able to live in the way. But by the way, I want to live happy is like, I want a mansion, I want a sports car, I want a Rolex, I want you know what I mean? Like again, that may make you happy, right? Not the stuff that makes me happy, but that may make you happy. That's fine. But that stuff costs money. Yeah. Right. So it's like this whole idea of happiness. I always say let's make it quantitative, right? Okay. How much money do you need? And there's a lot of people here that I work with. How much money do you need to be happy? Yeah. And people tell me a number. Yeah. And sometimes they tell me a number and I'm like, oh boy, listen, let me explain to you. If you work here for 20 years and you kill it, we ain't even going to be 10% of the way to your number. Yeah. We should find you another job, right? Like we got to get you on a different path. Yeah. There's other people I say, hey, look, that is, you're here, but that is 3 or 4 times higher, but there's a path. Yeah. Here's what it's going to take. Let's get on a plan. Let's go and let's figure that out, right? So the reason why I say let's make it quantitative is if you ask somebody, how much money do you need? Yeah. Most people don't say, I need $80,000. Yeah. Most people say, look at the numbers. How much money do you need to retire? The number in America now is people think they need $3 million or more. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you need $3 million for retirement, which means that if you end up with $3 million, that you probably made pre-tax $6 million plus everything you spent throughout your entire life. You got to make tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. Right? It's crazy.
Per annum, yeah.
So you say to yourself, okay, if that is the situation, then certain roles, you're never going to get there, right? And it goes back to, we're headed into a very interesting time in American history, which is people have access to capital and can deploy that capital in a way they previously couldn't. Mm-hmm. So think about the stock market as an example. Half of Americans have no investments. They just get paid, they put their money in the bank, and then that money withers away with inflation. So, okay, if we can just teach those 50% of people, hey, put some of the money in the bank, put some in the S&P 500. Don't pick stocks, don't do anything. Set it, forget it, let it ride. Let's see what happens. They made 25% last year. A lot of those people, if they had done that for the last 5 years and it was sitting in the market, they would have made more in the stock market going up 25% than they would have at their job. But you got to teach people that stuff.
Do you think it's a matter of like the lack of education or the fact that that 50% of Americans don't really have any residual income to invest in the market?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. And again, it goes back to like everyone wants things to be black and white. It's very gray, right? Yeah. So like, are homes unaffordable? Absolutely. Worst affordability in 40 years, right? Is inflation bad? Absolutely. You go McDonald's, like this is expensive, right? You're like, yo, I bought 2 cheeseburgers, whatever. It's like $20. Like, what the hell? If you go and you look at taxis, Ubers, right? The train, it just keeps going up, right? All of a sudden you're like, hey, this is real, right?
Yeah.
The joke of the coffee shop in New York City, right? You go, it's $5, like guaranteed.
And tips now.
Right? Then you got to tip 20% or you get mean mugged by the barista, right? So you say like, okay, we know housing affordability is bad. We know that inflation is going up. So everything around me is getting more expensive. Also, my dollars are losing value. I'm not educated financially, so I don't know to invest. I've never invested before. It sounds scary. I don't want to lose my money. I'm just going to save it. Also, we live in a society where people spend money on a lot of vices.
Oh, yeah.
Lotteries, weed, sports gambling, right? I mean, just go down the line, a lot of stuff. Again, not everybody, but a lot of people. And then you look and you say to yourself, there's got to be some sort of enjoyment tax, right? Like it is unrealistic to expect a 20-something-year-old kid to have no fun.
Yeah.
They may have fun inexpensively, but they still want to have fun. And so if you make, let's say, I don't know, $1,200 every paycheck, right? And that's what you're taking home. Doesn't sound like a lot of money for a lot of people, right? And then you got to pay your taxes, do all that, whatever. And so you got to pay rent, you got to buy food, you got to buy, whatever. How much money you have left over?
Yeah.
If you only have $100, $200, it's not like you can go ball out, and go to the club. But like you want to go to the bar, you want to get a beer, you want to go with your friends somewhere or whatever, right? So like some portion of what you otherwise could save goes to that enjoyment tax. And that's okay. Like people should have fun. But put $100 away every 2 weeks, right? Like start somewhere and start doing it. And so I think that education is probably out of everything. Maybe it isn't so much a driver of the problem. It is the like life raft out.
Yeah.
Is if we can educate people and say, listen, if you dollar cost average $10, $50, $100 every single paycheck for 4 or 5 years, and then you let the stock market do its thing, you end up in a pretty good spot.
A lot of what you're talking about is the agency aspect of it. Like as an individual, you have agency, make better choices. And trust me,
the whole book is
yeah, I know.
Right?
And
the whole theme of the book I wrote is, although I never explicitly say it, it's just like you have agency. The actions that you take determine the outcome of your life.
It's like the Twitter meme now, which is like you have free will. Go do what you may with it. But like if you zoom out, you also want to live in a society which is set up for people, like the default settings people. Like that's what I always think about, having like, read a little bit of history that the way you should design a proper society is where not everybody, you're not talking to 10%, like the 90% of the people, the 10% of people who want to act on their agency. What about the people who actually just want to chill out and live a default settings life? And their complaint is, for us, America is not worth it. And it's not just a hyperbole. Like there was a whole TikTok trend about like quiet quitting, moving out of America. It's not worth it. Let's go to Europe, live how our Italian ancestors used to live, on a rock, chill out, drink some wine. And that dichotomy is pretty stark right now, especially for Gen Z who has started questioning their relationship with work. The question is, you have kids now. How do you think they should approach all things work, life, America in general?
Well, I think for the people who want to do that stuff, like go do what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, if you want to go move to Italy and drink wine and chill, that sounds awesome, right? Like I personally would get bored of that.
Yeah.
Right. But there are people who do that. It makes them happy. Like, more power to you. And I think that's the big thing, right? Is when I speak about some of these things, I'm speaking from a position of like what works for me, what I've decided, how I've decided to design my life, our businesses, et cetera, right? It's one way. And I always say that there's multiple ways up the mountain.
Yeah.
Right. There's plenty of people. And if you think about what is success, I saw this great definition. Will Ahmed, who is the CEO and founder of Whoop. He tweeted, he said, success is being excited to go to work and being excited to go home.
Yeah.
And I thought that was
awesome.
That was a perfect
work
description.
and family. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just like whatever the thing is that you're going, that's quote unquote work.
Yeah.
You're an artist, you're a business person, you're an athlete, whatever in between. If you're excited to go to work, that's half the equation. And then if you're excited to go home, you want to be single and you're excited, go home, be single, right? If you want to go home and have a family of 10 kids, do it. Yeah. If you want to go home and have some crazy, weird relationship, whatever that society's like, it's all knock yourself out, right? Like, go home and be happy. And so I think that definition of success is so clarifying.
Yeah.
Be excited to go to work, be excited to go home. And so it says to you, okay, the guy or girl who wants to move to Italy and drink wine, are you happy?
Yeah.
Dude, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
Like, who are we to judge and say you should live your life any different way? But what we're looking for is high agency, action-oriented, highly ambitious people who want to build things.
Yeah.
That's not for everybody. That's actually not for most people. But for the subset of people that it is for, let's go. Let's see what we can do. Right? And it goes back to this idea of like competing. Is actually the person who moves to Italy, they're competing on who can chill the hardest. Right? Like that's the professional league of chilling is moving to a different country.
Many such cases,
Right? like it's just no different than the basketball player who says, I got to go to this country or this school so that I can get better training or whatever, right? It's you're quote unquote sacrificing for the thing you want. I'll leave my family here in America and I'll go to Italy. Okay. You're competing.
Yeah.
The competition we're playing is a different competition. But the same way that you would say, you go to the gym and there's maybe somebody who is on the, bicycle, you wouldn't expect the football player to be doing that. Yeah. Right? You expect them to be lifting weights because they're playing a different competition.
Yeah.
Same thing with, the competition of like, what do you ultimately want to do?
Yeah. What are you optimizing for?
Again, what are you optimizing for? What is the goal? Work backwards, right? And try to do that. And it goes back to a lot of people, I think, kind of go through the motions of life and, you got to kind of have it, snapped out of you at some point. And when you do, you start to say, okay, what do I want? I love Naval Ravikant's got this great definition as well. He goes, the test of intelligence is whether you got out of life what you wanted.
Yeah.
Like perfect, right?
Yeah.
And again, if you wanted to chill and drink wine in Italy, or if you wanted to go build some huge company and everything in between.
Have at it, yeah.
Right? I personally know I want to have certain degree of success in business and investing, but I don't want to run a 5,000 person company.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that isn't success. Like, actually, I would hate that. I'd be like, oh my God, like my brain is like, discombobulated here. And so it's, again, what is the thing that you're trying to accomplish? Point yourself in that direction and then go just execute.
My last question to you is, let's say like the first half of your career was in a place where you had to follow orders. You were in a really regimented way of thinking. Not a lot of like room for variability. You have to do what you are asked to do. From there, cut to what you ended up doing is you became kind of sort of like a contrarian thinker who was questioning systems, questioning how we do finance and all things. Do you think about that dichotomy and how you ended up having that frame of thinking?
So the secret of the army is that the best soldiers actually have a great degree of creative thinking, and they're able to do it within the confines of the hierarchical structure. And so, a kind of hypothetical would be, we've done all this training, done all this stuff. We go out on a mission and there's a house and we're going to go hit that house. And we're going to kick in the front door and we're going to go try to find the bad guy. Well, the training would tell you, hey, you walk up to the front door, you line up, everybody ready? Okay, kick it in, run in, do, like a robot, right? And that's what people think the military is. Actually, the best soldiers, the best teams, the best units, they look at the house and they say, I bet you if you looked at this house, they would think everyone's going to come through the front door. But you know what? There's this back door and it's got this thing in front of it. But if we can get that out of the way, we can hit it. It's probably not as fortified. And so therefore, when we get inside, then let's do this, whatever. And all of a sudden it's creative thinking within that hierarchical structure. And so if you look at the most elite soldiers in the military, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Delta Group, etc., they all look for entrepreneurial people. They're looking for people who can think on their feet, who can take all of this undefined problem set, this very complex environment, and sift through it and make decisions. Sounds a lot like business, right? Or investing. And so what I have found is whether you're talking about Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, you're talking about the most badass soldiers that we have, you're talking about the best business people, the best investors, or the best artists, they all do the same job, which is take a very complex problem set with undefined data, with constant change and variability, and make decisive action become reality. And they do that over and over and over again, and they end up moving closer to their goal. And so if you're playing basketball, you want to win the championship, there's a way to do that. You got to score more points than the other team every game. If you do that enough times, you win the championship. If you're the soldier, you got to be able to go night after night after night and do this over and over again. You got to outsmart the bad guys. If you're running a business, you got to come in every day. If people saw some of the text messages I get on a daily basis of problems, they'd be like, I don't want to do that, right? You got to figure it out. And so you just go through all these things. It really is the ability to process complexity of information and make good decisions. And so maybe the last thing I'll tell you is when my wife and I had our first child, we were thinking about if we only get to pick one thing, what is the thing we want to teach our children? And it really focused you. What is the most important thing? And the conclusion we came to is we want to teach them to be good decision makers because it's a specific skill that can be applied to any situation. It can be applied to their professional life, their personal life, their personal security, right? Who they end up marrying, like all these different things. If you're a good decision maker, you're good to go. And so maybe that's actually what success takes is whether you're an athlete, a business person, an investor, a soldier, an artist, whatever, you're just gonna be a good decision maker. And the artist knows where to put the brush.
Yeah.
I got no clue. My shit looks like my 3-year-old, right? But hopefully I'm making good decisions in other, areas that I'm trying to be good at. And I think that kind of good decision making, so we bring it full circle, that's what we need as politicians. We need good decision makers. We need people who are able to take a complexity of information, sift through it, be decisive, and say, hey, what am I trying to accomplish here? And I think that what the country realized was, hold on a second, there's a bunch of people who are optimizing for stuff that actually makes them a bad decision maker. They're looking at a role and they're saying, you're the best person for the role, but you get the job, other person because of something other than competence. You do that enough times, people are like, wait, what the hell's going on? You're a bad decision maker. Get out of here, right? Like we need somebody in this leadership role that is a good decision maker. And I think that's really where kind of this all ties together is politicians is just a chosen occupation for those people. I don't know why they choose that, but that's why they choose.
It's a horrible job if you ask me.
I get asked all the time, like, am I ever going to go into politics? I'm like, do you see what they do on a day-to-day basis? I am good. It's much more fun to commentate on it than do it, right? But I do think that it's no different than a lot of these other things. And so it just goes back to like, can you be a good decision maker? And that's who we want as leaders, right? We want people who are able to be good decision makers.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.